Welcome, fellow green thumbs and garden enthusiasts. Today, we're going to dive deep into the world of gardening, exploring a technique that has been used for centuries to ensure a healthy and plentiful harvest. But before we get started, we need to make something clear. This video is for educational purposes only. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we strongly advise all viewers to conduct their own research and consult with a professional if necessary before implementing any of the practices discussed. Gardening, like any other skill, requires knowledge, patience, and a fair bit of trial and error. So, without further ado, let's dig into the magic of crop rotation. Ever wondered how to maximize your vegetable yield in the same space? Well, let's delve into the magic of crop rotation. This is no modern-day trick, but an ancient farming practice that has been enriching our soils and filling our plates for centuries. Imagine a relay race where different vegetables take turns to grow in the same plot of land. That's essentially what crop rotation is, a systematic approach to deciding which crop to plant next. But why bother? Well, crop rotation can significantly increase the yield of your vegetable garden. Each type of vegetable contributes differently to the soil, some adding nutrients while others consuming them. This creates a balanced diet for your garden, which in turn leads to a more fruitful harvest. Plus, it's a natural pest and disease control strategy. Different crops attract different pests, so changing crops can disrupt pest life cycles. With crop rotation, you can enjoy a bountiful harvest from your garden every season. But what makes crop rotation so effective? Well, let's dive into the science of it all. You see, different plants have different nutrient needs. Some, like tomatoes, are heavy feeders, gulping up nitrogen from the soil, while others, like beans, are light feeders, leaving plenty of nutrients behind. And then you have plants like peas, which are nitrogen-fixing, meaning they add nitrogen back into the soil. So, by switching up what you plant in a specific spot, you can ensure that your soil doesn't get drained of one particular nutrient. Now imagine if you were to plant tomatoes in the same spot, year after year. Your soil would eventually be stripped of all its nitrogen, leaving you with weak, undernourished plants. But if you were to follow up a season of tomatoes with a season of peas, the peas would replenish the nitrogen that the tomatoes used up. It's a beautiful cycle, isn't it? But nutrients aren't the only thing at play here. Different plants also have varying levels of resistance to pests and diseases. For instance, pests that love your lettuce might not be so fond of your onions. By rotating your crops, you can effectively break the life cycles of these pests and diseases, preventing them from establishing a permanent home in your garden. Let's illustrate this with an example. Say, you have a problem with a certain type of beetle that adores your potatoes. If you plant potatoes in the same spot every year, these beetles will always have a food source, and their population will continue to grow. But if you switch up your potatoes with carrots, the beetles might starve and die off because they don't eat carrots. So you see, crop rotation isn't just about keeping your soil filled with nutrients. It's also about keeping those pesky pests at bay. It's a strategy that's as old as agriculture itself, and it's still one of the most effective ways to keep your garden healthy and productive. To put it simply, crop rotation is all about giving your soil a well-deserved break. Ready to give crop rotation a try? Here's how you can get started. First, let's start with the basics. Crop rotation is not a random game of musical chairs for your plants. It's methodical, intentional, and strategic. It's all about understanding the needs and characteristics of different plant families, and then rotating them through your garden in a way that benefits the soil and the plants themselves. Picture your garden as a dinner table that hosts a different family of vegetables each season. Just like you wouldn't serve the same meal every night, you shouldn't plant the same crop family in the same spot year after year. Different plant families have different nutrient needs and pest profiles. By changing up the menu, or in this case, the plants, you can keep your soil nutrient-rich and your pest problems in check. Now, let's move on to the steps. Step 1. Identify your crop families. Most vegetables fall into one of 5 families: legumes, brassicas, nightshades, cucurbits, and roots. Legumes like peas and beans fix nitrogen in the soil. Brassicas like broccoli and kale appreciate the nitrogen left by the legumes. Nightshades such as tomatoes and peppers are heavy feeders that love a rich soil. Cucurbits like cucumbers and pumpkins are also heavy feeders but prefer a different nutrient mix. Finally, root vegetables like carrots and beets are light feeders that can do well in the soil that's been worked by the previous crops. Step 2. Map your garden. Draw out your garden space and plan where each family will go each season. Remember, The idea is to move each family to a new spot each time you plant. Step 3. Keep a garden journal. This is where record keeping comes in. Note down what you planted, where and when. This will help you track your rotation and make adjustments as needed. Now, let's look at a simple example of a crop rotation plan. In the first year, you might plant legumes in the first quarter of your garden, brassicas in the second, nightshades in the third, and cucurbits in the fourth. In the second year, you'd move each family one spot to the right. The legumes would go where the brassicas were where the nightshades were, and so on. The cucurbits from the last spot would circle back to the first spot. This is a basic rotation plan. As you gain experience, you might adjust this plan based on your garden's specific conditions and your family's eating habits. Remember, crop rotation is a long-term strategy. It may take a few seasons to see the full benefits, but with patience and perseverance, you'll be rewarded with healthier soil, healthier plants, and a bountiful harvest. And there you have it, a complete guide to starting your crop rotation journey. Before we wrap up, let's address some common mistakes that beginners might make in crop rotation and how to avoid them. Even the most experienced gardeners can slip up from time to time, but being aware of these pitfalls can help you navigate your crop rotation journey more smoothly. The first common mistake is not keeping a record. As we mentioned before, keeping a garden journal is crucial. Without it, you may not remember what was planted and where, leading to unintentional repetition of crops in the same spot, which defeats the purpose of crop rotation. So always keep a journal and update it regularly. The second common mistake is not considering the crop families. Some gardeners plant based on what they want to eat rather than considering the needs of the soil and the plants themselves. Remember, different plant families have different nutrient needs and pest profiles. Make sure to identify your crop families and plan your rotation accordingly. The third common mistake is not being patient. Crop rotation is a long-term strategy, and it may take a few seasons to see the full benefits. Don't be discouraged if you don't see immediate results. Keep rotating your crops, maintain your records, and have faith in the process. Lastly, even though crop rotation is a proven technique, it doesn't mean it's a one-size-fits-all solution. Every garden is unique, so feel free to tweak your rotation plan based on your garden's specific conditions and your family's eating habits. The key is to observe, learn, and adapt. And with that, you are now more prepared to avoid these common pitfalls and succeed in your crop rotation journey. Remember, the goal is a healthier, more bountiful garden, and with patience and perseverance, you can achieve that. Before we wrap up, let's quickly revisit the key points we've discussed today. We've unearthed the magic of crop rotation, a time-tested technique that can boost your garden's yield and health. The science behind it is fascinating, revolving around the concept that different crops have different nutritional requirements and pest profiles. This means that rotating your crops can help to balance soil nutrients and disrupt pest cycles, enhancing your garden's vitality. We've also walked through the steps to implement crop rotation in your own garden. It starts with understanding your crops, planning your rotation, and then taking action. But it doesn't end there. Keeping records is integral to this process. It helps you remember what was planted, where, and when, allowing you to plan effectively for the next season. Remember, a successful garden is all about balance, and with crop rotation, you're one step closer to achieving that balance.